Hi everybody on BookTube, welcome to my channel. Today I just thought I'd post a quick book review. I know you guys are busy in quarantine, a lot of stuff going on. So I just thought I'd do a really quick book review on the book I read to start my book haul off, and that is Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. Now just before we start this book, I know I'm late onto this review and I spent like a whole week reading this book because I had to stop at certain points. So this is going to be a little bit longer, but I'm just going to jump into non-spoilers first, and then the spoilers for this book and the plot and things I did like and that I didn't like. So first off, I'm just going to talk about non-spoilers. If you have not read this book yet, just listen to the non-spoilers and then hop back off this channel. Click away from the video, please. I don't want to spoil anyone for this. So here we go, non-spoilers. This book, Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood, is the first in a high fantasy adult book series by Sarah J. Maas. It's her first adult book series, I've been told. I didn't do much research on this to start, but that's what I heard anyway. I picked it up to read more high fantasy and to jump into adult. I haven't really read any other adult fantasy books aside from new adult fantasy book by J. Kristoff, which is I think it's Nevernight Chronicles, I think it's called. I get mixed up, I call it God's Grave all the time. Those books are really awesome, and I thought this would be pretty similar, and we'll see my opinions when we get into the actual video. So for the plot, I'm just going to do a little non-spoiler review. So basically this book, Crescent City, is based on a girl called Bryce, and she's basically alien from Throne of Glass, and the main character's name I cannot remember, from ACOTAR and Court of Thorns and Roses. So she's half fae, half human, and she's living in the main city in this book, which I've already forgotten what it's called. No, I can't remember. So she goes there, she lives there with her friend Danica, and they kind of get up to all sorts of trouble. She's a very party girl, so yeah, it's jumping straight into the adult themes in here. She hooks up with a bunch of people. She has a boyfriend at the time, and basically the story unfolds when something bad happens to her and Danica, and she ends up being called on this epic, it's kind of like a murder mystery, I would say. So trying to find out the cause of these problems and also trying to find a mystical object, which we find out later. So that's basically all for the non-spoilers. I don't know how much to give without spoiling everybody, so please click off this video if you have not read this book yet. And I'm going to dive into the spoilers first and things I liked about the series in 3, 2, 1, bye! Okay, everyone's gone. Alright, here we go. I'm going to bring up my notes here. I've got just a couple pages so we can do a really quick review and see what we're going to talk about in this one. So first off, things that I actually liked about this series. Alright, the first one is a character called Run, who is Bryce's half-brother. He's on the full fae side of the family. Him actually being a really supportive brother and a really nice character towards Bryce and towards other people in the book series. I adored listening to his point of view a lot of the time, and he had great character interactions with everyone. I really kind of related a bit to his attitude a lot of the time, so I find him really funny and a great kind of offset to Hunt's character in the book, if you know what I'm talking about. That was awesome, and him and a witch character called Hypaxia, if it's Hypaxia, I'm so sorry, I can't pronounce names properly, so I'm just going to call her Hypaxia. I found their relationship very cute, even if it's a platonic one in the end. I still really like their friendship, and where it's heading in a future book, we'll see how we go, but I thought that was really cool. Next thing I really liked was the politics of this world and city and the allegiance to the houses. So in this book we have House of Earth and Blood, which is what is the human one, I understand, and the House of Sky and Breath is mentioned a little bit, which is the fairy kind of side, which Bryce has an allegiance to due to her father's side. So that was really cool. I like seeing all the different creatures and how they interact with each other in the world, the politics going on, the different allegiances to the different houses that we hear about, like Jezebel, who's a witch. She's in the Shadow and Bone, I think it is, or Shadow and Fire house. So I thought that was cool to hear about, and all sorts of things like that. How they interact was pretty interesting. Like the angels basically run the whole city and are part of the police force and the military as well, and the separate factions within like the wolf packs, for example, like the different legions and different levels of hierarchies of pacts in there I found really interesting to learn about. So that's basically it on that point. The next one I really liked was the Jehopa and the Sphinx interactions and Bryce's pet. I can never remember its actual name, but Jehopa being the fire sprite that Bryce works with, and the Sphinx type dog creature that she keeps around the office and around her house. Those interactions really, for me, mellowed out Bryce's character a little bit and gave her some redeeming qualities for me. I really did not like her, and we'll get onto that later, but I thought it was really cute to have a balancing act with her, having some actual functional friends in her life, and the characters were both really fun to read about, so I enjoyed that a lot. Alright, next thing I liked, I wish we did have more time with Run's friends and more of the fairy characters in this book. We didn't really get that much aside from one or two interactions with Bryce's father, who I think has more development on the way in future. I would really like to see that later on, if he has more character development and ends up meeting back up with Bryce's mum. Run's friends are really cool as well. I would really like to see more of them. I wish we did see more of them. They were really cool to see how Run interacts with his friends and how they're very similar to him in personality, I think, and they're a great match together, so that was awesome. The Serpent Queen. So this is another character in the book. She basically runs like a marketplace and a black market deal center down in the downtown part of the city. I found her a really cool character, kind of like a Medusa throwback kind of thing. I found that fascinating, and she was a really cool cat kind of character, you know, knew what was going on, very calculating, which I enjoyed very much to watch, so let's hope she keeps up in future. Yeah, the only other thing I have for the good things I liked, is a very short list, was the anti-drug and, not sexual assault, but, not that, it's more just the, consent, being, like, hammered over the head in this book. It's very anti-drug. I think that's what Sarah J. Maas was trying to get across. It is quite... Bryce does use a lot of illicit drugs in this book, and it is kind of hammered home that that was an issue that needed to be rectified for her. She was in a very dark place at the time, and I think that's reflected well. I also like, there's a couple of times in the book where it gets very creepy, and it could be heading on a situation where there wasn't consent involved, in the ways of physical intimacy, so without triggering, like, having any triggering words in there, I'm really sorry, but I'm just going to say that consent was over-amplified a bit, which is great. I love seeing that in books, especially with things that Sarah J. Maas has written before. There has been a very questionable level of consent present in some of the acts that happen in her books, so I'm very happy this was addressed well, particularly with, I think his name was Malcolm, who's a vampire in this book. He was called out on his really problematic behaviour, which I really liked for Bryce, so I thought that was great. Alright, that's my whining and complaining and a bit of my compliments about the book. Now I'm going to get into the things that I really didn't like, and this is a long list, so I hope you're set in for me complaining about this book for a long time. Alright, first off, the thing with Fury and Juniper. Now, if you have read this book, you would have noticed that Juniper is a satyr, I believe, and she is a very successful dancer in the city. I think she does ballet, I'm not quite sure, but she and Bryce are friends because of their dancing ability, and she's a really sweet character. She and Fury's an assassin that works for different people in the city as well. It's revealed later on in the second half of the book that they do have a romantic relationship with each other. Now, I just want to say, I really like both of the characters. I like how they are in a relationship together. I have nothing against that whatsoever. However, I do want to stress that, in my opinion, that is not representation for the LGBTQ plus community, and that is not a good way to address a romance. Isn't just a pass-off comment once in a paragraph, and then Bryce rolling her eyes, and as soon as Juniper starts getting into the details, she just says, oh, whatever, love is love. Like, it just, I know it doesn't need to come across that way, but the way Bryce says that to Juniper, it kind of seems a bit like a flippant off remark, like she doesn't want to hear about it, or she's not interested in her friend's love life, or she doesn't appreciate that because she's straight. I'm not really sure what it was, but to me it was a little bit icky, and I didn't appreciate it as much as if either Fury or Juniper had gone into a conversation with Bryce, or someone else off page, or some other side character just explaining about their relationship, or maybe that's something for the sequel, I'm not sure, but I would really like to see more of that in future, and their relationship actually explored, rather than just an offhand remark and expecting that to make the fans happy about this book, that there's representation, because it really isn't. Okay, so that was my little rant. Now let's move on to particular things about characters that I didn't like. We're going to start off, actually no, I'll start off with plot, so it's easier. So plot things I didn't like. I've got my notes up here, sorry guys. Alright, so the beginning of the book. If you have seen this book before on the shelf, it is extremely large for a fantasy book. It is around about 800 pages. Can you guys see that? Yeah, 800 pages. This boy is thick, alright? So this is a bit ridiculous for a first book in a high fantasy series. I do not think, honestly, it should have been 800 pages. I think if you were really trying to get your point across, you could have done it in maybe half the length, 400, 500 pages, but 800 seems ridiculously high for an adult fantasy that most of the time was just like quips and describing characters and how hot they are. So if you cut that out, the book could have been way shorter and easier to read for me in particular. It does take about 100 pages or so before you even get into the plot and the big events of the plot and character development. So if you're going to read this book, I would say you're in it for the long haul. Like, keep going. I know that's bad to say, but honestly, it is very slow to start, and you probably won't get into it until around 200 pages plus. Alright, next one. Okay, so there's a major emotional event that happens for Bryce at the start of this book about, I want to say it's probably a couple of chapters in. There's a big event that happens that changes the course of her life, and it's her motivation for the rest of the book to find this mystery, right? Okay, so this happens. It's very devastating for everyone, but it is very predictable, and it is spoiled on the back cover of this book. So if you're going to pick it up, and if you read the back blurb and you know the actual summary of what's going to happen, if you read the summary of the book or the blurb on the back, or anywhere on like Spark Notes or another book reviewer will say it, just be aware that's basically going to spoil you for the event. It's pretty obvious to find out who it's talking about once you pick up the book yourself, so be aware of that. Going in, you will definitely know what's going to happen in the first couple chapters, and that can kind of feel like a bit of a spoiler, and the shock factor's already gone. Like, I honestly, the shock factor was gone for me. I didn't appreciate being spoiled on the back cover for what was going to happen. I think it would have been more valuable and a bit more of an adventure for me if I hadn't have known about that early on. Alright, next thing I want to talk about is the mystery plot was extremely slow for me. I'm very picky with my fantasy books. I like to have mystery constantly in a mystery book, and if not, that there's actually action happening. And the plot speeds up quickly so that characters can find clues and they can sort out things, they can hit up leads, that sort of thing. This book, I found a couple issues with it because I don't know why, but Sarah J. Maas's writing for me isn't my favourite writing style, and that's nothing against her at all as a writer, it's just me personally. So when I see pages and pages upon of dialogue or character conversation or complimenting another character or them having romantic interactions, it doesn't really suit, like, it suits the adult fantasy concept, but it doesn't suit the mystery for me. So that kind of made it feel like it was dragging, and there was a big gap between mystery clues, and a lot of it happened towards the back half of the book, because the first half is just the setup. Sorry. So, yeah, that's what's happening at the moment with that book. It's just really slow off the get-go, and the clues that they find are few and far between, so you've really got to pay attention to what's happening in the background. And a lot of it is just filled up with either romantic interactions or encounters with other characters, or just straight up dialogue, or like inner head monologue, I'm going to say, like thoughts on paper. It can sound a bit like word vomit, but by like the 5th page in, you can start to feel like, oh, okay, what's happening right now? So yeah, just be warned about this book. If you want to pick it up, be prepared for like it to be a very slow mystery. Alright, next one. Sorry, I'm rambling so much. I'm just angry about this book. Alright, last one I'm gonna say is that this book really reminded me of Cassandra Clare's depiction of Shadowhunters and Angels from the Shadowhunters Chronicles, Shadowhunter Chronicle books, and the her other series trilogies that she has written recently. Especially with their arrogance and their like stickler for rules type. They're very militant, and I wouldn't expect anything else really. I kind of was expecting them to be a bit more like cherubs in that depiction, but I like that angels are depicted in a militant, very strict, very overpowering sort of way. I just automatically called it back to Shadowhunters, with them being very like condescending towards other races and other species in this book. They're very elitist. They're very like must be as pure as possible kind of sense. And they are very corrupt as well in some points, which I found really cool to read. But that's a problem I found, is that they're often in fantasy, angels are either predicted as like incredibly sexy or incredibly scary, and it's always one of the two, or sometimes both at once for the same character. Honestly, I didn't feel threatening. Like, I didn't feel scared of any of the angels in this book. They weren't evil enough for me. But honestly, like, it's cool to see them in a different way, described as kind of condescending assholes, really. So, yeah, that was cool, I suppose. It did call back to Shadowhunters a little bit because I had read that series first, but if you haven't read the Shadowhunters, then don't be worried about it. Alright, that was an absolute rant about the plot, so let's get into what I didn't like about the main characters. Now, in this book, honestly, I was going in thinking that Bryce was going to be the main character, and honestly, for most of the book, I wasn't sure. Because the POV stays the same, but the focus for characters switches between Bryce and Hunt all the time. And honestly, it ended up feeling like they were the two main characters, and there wasn't a single character I was supposed to relate to more. I wasn't really sure. So let's go through the things with Bryce first, because she was my least favourite character in this entire book, and that's sad because she's the main protagonist. So the first thing is with this one, honestly, for me, I'm very picky about my female protagonists. I know that sounds really critical. I'm judgy. I don't like whiny characters, and I don't like little, like, woozy kind of characters, so she kind of stood out to me as odd. She's very, I know this is a fantasy book, and it's an adult fantasy book, but she, to me, was very irresponsible and very unlikable. When we first meet her, she's basically like a drug addict. Like, she uses drugs for fun at parties. She's very irresponsible. She drinks a lot. And then, which is fine. Like, if you want to do that to party, that's fine. But she's not safe about it. And she gets angry when other people in her life try to make sure she's safe about doing it. Like, her boyfriend at the time and her boyfriend to be, I would say, and then other male characters like her half brother Rune try and talk her out of it and try to make her see sense and help protect her, and she basically just calls them names and screams at them for trying to be decent people. So that really irritated me throughout this book. Honestly, she's a bit unlikable for me. I find when you're putting yourself deliberately in danger like that, and not willing to accept the consequences for it, it is very irresponsible and quite hypocritical of you. Yeah, so that was what I was thinking about. Also, another thing with her dad, who's the Autumn King, I believe, of the fairies. It is mentioned in this book. Please, a warning for abuse in this. So I'm just putting up a warning right now. I'm going to be talking about domestic abuse. It is mentioned in this book once or twice that her mother was physically abused by her father at one point, and that's what caused her to leave him and run away before Bryce. So that was awful to hear about, but the fact that that happened to her mother by her father somehow justifies her same comments and her reaction and her as an excuse for her to be awful to every male character she ever comes across again. So that's what I have a problem with. She has daddy issues basically, and that's fine. She's justified to have issues with her father, but to also be so awful to every other male character in this book upon first meeting them just because they're male is not only sexist, but in some cases it's also racist towards fairies at different points. She calls them names because they're being protective of one of their own, and she finds that really awful for some reason. So she goes over the top, starts accusing people of being awful and being abusers, and basically generalizing an entire race and other races. She expresses her dislike for angels, her dislike for wolves, and all sorts of other races just because they're different from her. So I find that really inexcusable and awful that she would do that. And I know that seems like a character flaw, but when you're being racist and sexist against all men because you had one bad experience with one isn't really fair. Especially when we meet the male characters also, and they are very respectable, very gentlemanly, very nice. So I kind of find that a bit off for me personally. So I hope I didn't offend anyone. I'm really sorry. They're just my stupid opinions, so don't pay attention to me. Alright, next one about Bryce. I want to say with this, now I don't have an experience with this kind of thing in books. I haven't read this very often in adult fantasy, but she honestly makes so many inappropriate innuendos and jokes in this book. I'm not even kidding. That's banter, I get it. Like, she likes the male character a lot, I get it. But the amount of jokes she makes me uncomfortable reading and made me feel like a creep. And also at the same time, he, at the start, when she first starts making these jokes to be like friendly and quirky and whatever you want to call it, her being a strong female lead, the male character Hunt was very uncomfortable with her making these jokes about him, and she didn't stop doing it. That time I was a bit concerned about that, and I felt really bad for Hunt as well because he's just trying to do his job in the book. He's not trying to get with her until like the last quarter of the book probably. So to hear that happening so early and so often, and her being a creep, like her trying to watch him like in the shower and her like peeping around corners trying to find him shirtless, like that's kind of gross. And I was like, ooh, it's on thin ice for me as being respectable boundaries. And I think for me, if someone had done that to me consistently, I would be very uncomfortable with it. So that's just another thing I want to point out, a bit of a nitpick about Bryce. Alright, I just want to say something also. She basically rants on people for having money in this book. For her boyfriend she has at the start of this book, she basically has a go at people for earning money and having goals in their career and being successful. Like, she hates successful people, and particularly successful men, for really no reason whatsoever, just because she's broke. And then she literally is a sugar baby to her boyfriend. Like, he pays for her meals and everything, and she sleeps with him. That's basically the deal. Like, the unofficial deal. Like, it's not, and I'm not insinuating that's what the relationship is like, but that's pretty much what it sounds like to me anyway, reading it. And then later on in the book, she has her job at the antiquity store, and she earns lots of money. And she also takes her friend Danica's offer to buy the apartment for her. So she ends up living in a very, very well-furnished apartment for free, and she has a well-paying job, and she sees nothing wrong with that whatsoever, and she doesn't see the hypocrisy that she showed at the start of the book when she was basically backing out rich people and how they don't work hard for their money, even though that's what her old boyfriend does. He works for his dad's company, and he works hard. He's always on the phone. Like, that is rude, but he's working hard for his company, and that should be an admirable thing for people to do, I would say. So that's another nitpick I had about Bryce's character. I just want to talk about some things with the dialogue really quickly. Some of the terms and vocabulary used in this book is weird. So let's go over the first one. Sorry, I'm stretching out my leg. It's going numb. The use of male and female is used instead of man and woman words and other... yeah, I find that kind of weird. There's no... non-binary gender terms. It's all male or female, which is a bit odd. And it sounds kind of sometimes it does seem not only derogatory but very like predatory almost at certain times in this book. Like they refer to people as male, and like as a challenge. It kind of sounds like it's predatory, or like someone trying to dominate someone instead of just male or female. Like sounds more gentle and assertive, and like respectful and restrained rather than aggressive, which is what male and female sounds like in some contexts. I'm not saying all, but in some. Another one I want to say is the word alpha holes is used by Bryce exclusively to describe like alpha male characters who are assholes, she defines it as. But she uses it towards people she doesn't even know a lot of the time, so I found that really annoying to have that really odd word repeated constantly. And oh my goodness, I don't know if this is Sarah J. Maas or if it's just me freaking out, but the amount of times they say the word breathed and what was the other one? They use breathed and smirked so many times. If I was taking a game like take a shot every time they said this, I would be dead by like chapter 4. The amount of times they said these words, and I guess it's better than she let out a breath, she didn't know she was holding line. Like that's better than that, but saying breathe so much and saying smirk so much, like it's made me question if they don't have any other facial expressions. Like all the characters just have one default expression. That's the amount of times it was used. And the last nitpick I want to have for the dialogue and the story in general is that I'm not a fan of enemies to lovers romance. I'm really not. I know going into this book I should have predicted something like that, but I didn't. I thought it was going to be friends to lovers romance, which is my jam. And it wasn't. It was kind of like dislike to to lovers romance. Sorry. They're not really enemies to start with, but they certainly don't like each other. I kind of got an issue with it when Hunt said he had still had love for his previous partner, who is unfortunately dead at this time, and he still had his heart was still with her. Yet Bryce continued to flirt with him and basically be super sexual, super flirty with him, to the point of him being uncomfortable, and then that ended up making him question his love for his old partner, even though Bryce knew fully well that he still had intentions to still love his old partner, which kind of worried me and disgusted me a little bit. Like, I get that Bryce likes him, and he does like Bryce in a small way, but when someone opens your heart up to you like that, I find that really awful that you would just discount it and then just try and make a move on them straight away. So yeah, I found that a bit uncomfortable through part of the series, and I feel like not the series, this book, sorry. And I think they should have addressed that a little more going in. They should have really explored grief in that way, and help Hunt work through it rather than just making it end up like he gave in to Bryce being extra flirty and awful with him. So yeah, that's my complaints about that. Let's move on to Hunt. So let's start with the first one. He is an angel, so naturally he's going to be an awful person. Off the bat, he's basically prejudiced towards any other race that isn't an angel, and even within angels, he hates everybody, just because he was a traitor before. He basically hates everybody, like even Run, who's really nice and open with him about what he discovers during the book and his meetings with other people. He tells him basically everything he knows all the time, and he's only there to protect Bryce. And basically he's being an awesome brother, and Hunt just straight up dislikes him for literally standing next to Bryce and being a supportive person. So that kind of makes me uncomfortable with that. I don't like that. I think everyone should just calm down. Next thing, he's also a little creepy with Bryce at some points. There's a lot of mentions of like her in lingerie around her house, and he just keeps looking at her even though it's just a job and you should respect people's privacy in your own house. Like, it doesn't matter if she leaves the windows open. Like, I feel like, yes, that's on her, but you should also take responsibility for you not being a creep. So that was pretty gross. I feel like I needed to take a shower after reading some of the things that he thinks about. Another thing is he is a straight up liar to Bryce throughout this book. I'm not going to spoil anything, but he does lie about several things in this book, and doesn't tell Bryce about them, and about his past. And the fact that he is a slave to the other archangels in this book is romanticized a little bit. I feel that made me very uncomfortable to read about. And like to see him in such a sad position like that and him helpless really made me feel awful and didn't make me want to think like that's cute, like, you know, whatever. And there's a scene in this book where I'm not going to spoil it, but basically he gets tries to be someone tries to buy him back from somebody else to save his freedom in exchange for their own, and to see like his negotiable price being put out and then him helpless to change the situation and him standing there and having to watch other people debate over his like life sentence basically to serve someone else for the rest of his life. It's just awful and made me feel really sick, and I thought like that's disgusting. Why is this being mentioned? Like, is this it sounds like it's such a like a romantic thing, like to sacrifice yourself for someone else, but when they're a slave like that and they can't do anything about the situation, it kind of makes me feel ill that you are confronting it in front of him, like talking not to him but talking to the owner of somebody else, like debating whether you should trade lives with them, like straight up, and not asking for his input whatsoever. Like that just made me feel really awful and ill. It didn't seem romantic to me. It kind of took it out of it and made me feel gross. And that's nothing against Hunt. That's not his fault, but just against the romance part in general for that. Another thing is that he goes rigid a lot. That's mentioned, and it seems in context, it seems to be him going like still, like his muscles lock up, but sometimes it can be construed a different way, and it seems really odd. Like if you're uncomfortable with something in a situation, I would be happy if Mass would say something like froze or like stop moving or tensed. But the fact that the only word she can write in this context is rigid is kind of weird. It's mentioned a lot of times in this book. Another thing about him is, let me see, he gets, okay, this one's, triggers for, sexual content in this comment, but basically he gets aroused really easily by Bryce. Like, she can, like, touch his hand, and he's like, oh, he gets really turned on by her for weird reasons. I have no experience in this area, but that seems really odd to me. And when she talks about handling a gun, he gets really aroused by her, and I found that uncomfortable. Like, is that normal for you guys? I don't know. That made me feel really weird that he was so, excited by her mentioning that she can fire guns properly, like, and she knows how to use guns because her dad taught her. Like, just hearing someone talk about weapons isn't really something that would get me in the mood, but I guess for him. And that he likes Bryce for basically no reason. Like, I know she's spunky and, you know, she's curvy, but other than that, like, for me personally, she doesn't have any really good qualities. Like, she's resourceful maybe once in this book. She doesn't really have anything else that would draw me towards her as a character, so I have no idea what Hunt sees in her at all, except maybe she's fiery and just doesn't give a shit about anyone else's opinions, which I guess could be considered attractive, so we'll see. I guess it's just magic plot convenience, but whatever. Alright, so that's me ranting forever about the characters. Let's talk about the ending. Now, spoilers, so if you're still here, I don't know what you're still doing here, but please leave. I don't want to spoil you for the ending. It's going to ruin the book for you, so please don't watch this bit if you have not read the book yourself. Alright, or do not want to be spoiled. So first thing, I really liked how we got to see Danica there, again, as one final send-off to her, and like a rounding of Bryce's character. I thought that was really sweet. They shared a really nice moment, when Bryce is doing her ordeal for her, and Danica's there to help her through the last part. I found that really sweet. And I love seeing Danica come back and support her best friend like that, even after all that she's done. I found that really sweet. So, good job, Mass, you wrote that well. And I really liked Danica. I thought she was a great character, so that was awesome. Next thing, the ending, when Bryce does her ordeal, she ends up inheriting this massive power that even surpasses her father's. But it kind of also defies the entire rules for the drop. which is what is called like the ascending part of the ordeal, when the person comes back to their mortal body and assumes immortality. Now, they kind of, I know this is to show that Bryce is all-powered and whatever, but they set up the rules for this drop in universe very early on in the book, and the fact that she basically skips over all of the rules and defies the actual process itself sounds kind of odd and kind of frustrated me a little bit. Like, she can be powerful, that's fine, but if you don't stick to the rules made in your own universe, then that kind of defeats the point of making the rules in the first place. So the magic system sounds a little flawed in this aspect. Maybe that's the point, I'm not sure, maybe I'm just being stupid. But that's what I thought about that. I found that really weird. So yeah, that's a bit odd on that part. Okay, so I also want to talk about Run's bloodline issue. There was a comment made about a prophecy that Run got when he was younger from the Sphinx, and it said that his bloodline would end with him. Now that kind of sounds really ominous, and I'm sort of scared for Run, to be honest. I really love him as a character, so going forward, I'm really worried that he's going to be killed off, or that like something could be changed, or it could be a big plot twist and a secret revealed or something like that. I feel like it's either hinting at Hypaxia being infertile or him being infertile, or both, because in other series I have read that witches are not able to bear children or something like that. So either that's going to happen, which I find unlikely, or the fact that he is in fact part of the LGBTQ plus community perhaps, and that he is not going to confine with the norms of having children, either on his own terms or not. So I find that interesting, and I'd love to see where they take it. I feel kind of iffy about it, but I think it could be possibly construed that Run is not entirely heterosexual in his romantic and sexual interests. He could be bisexual or homosexual, it doesn't matter, but I feel that could be a direction this could take, which would be exciting to see. Or it could be something to do with Hypaxia and their relationship strengthening and them being together, but something going wrong in the process and him not being able to have children, or that the children he has could not be from the Fae bloodline. So something can happen along those lines. Maybe his Fae blood would get cancelled out by something else, or cursed or something like that, and he could not be, maybe he could be human, or something along those lines, something like that. Like he could be totally human and his Fae bloodline would end there. So that's interesting as well. And the other thing I would like to say is Ada's and Jessica's plan. So in the last couple chapters we see that Jessica is the witch that Bryce works for, and Adas is one of the princes of hell. And they end up having a conversation in Earth, Midgard is what they call it in this book, sorry, about going forward, what their plan is, and that Jessica must not fail at this time. Now, I don't know what that means. It kind of reminded me of Shadowhunters a little bit, in Chain of Gold, which is the most recent release by Cassandra Clare. But I found that really interesting that Jessica's working with a Prince of Hell. I feel like they are on Bryce's side at this point, and are planning to use Bryce's power to possibly usurp the Asteri, or take over the whole country, or help the human rebellion. So we'll see what happens there, but I found that kind of cool and a good setup for the sequel. I'm not sure if I'll read the sequel or not at this point. When it comes out, I might forget about this series entirely, or just not want to read it anymore. So let me know in the comments if you would like me to read it when it comes out. And if you have any book recommendations, please leave them below. I would love to see it. The next review will be on The Lies of Locke Lamora, so keep an eye out for my video on that. Thank you guys for listening so much. I'm so sorry this video was so long. I just wanted to go on a rant about Sarah J. Maas's books because they frustrate me to no end. I don't really know why I picked this up to begin with, actually. Made a big mistake. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you're new. Put a like on my video. Comment below if you have any suggestions or comments about my videos, and I'll see you in the next one.